After her footprints were found at the scene of a brutal double homicide, 55-year-old Sherry Heffernan has been charged with the murders of her father, Jack Enders, and his girlfriend, Francois Pitois. As her trial date approaches, prosecutors get some additional evidence to help convince the jury of her guilt.
There was red staining on the door. Ultimately, on 2 of those doorknobs, the DNA did come back to Sherry Heffernan and Jack.
And that's important because when you stab somebody, the knife gets bloody, it gets slippery, your hand tends to go down, you tend to get cut.
The DNA results seemed to prove Sherry was the only person who could have committed the murders. But when the trial starts in February 2024, Sherry's lawyers insist police have arrested the wrong person.
One of the defenses was, well, she's a 50-something-year-old woman, she's not physically capable of doing this. Well, we actually showed for the jury a video of her pushing this little boat. Somebody who's not physically capable of doing things doesn't push a boat on a trailer.
Prosecutors also counter with their strong evidence, highlighting Sherry's motive.
We were able to prove at trial that Jack did have a will, where his will in the past had left everything to Sherry.
In April of 2021, Jack changed his will. And the new will that he had created left everything to his grandson, Andrew.
Sherry, I believe that her and her dad got into an argument, and I heard that he told her that he was taking her out of his will.
I didn't know anything about wills or stuff at the time, so I didn't know who would benefit from it, but the only person that was tied to that house at the time was Sherry.
She was supposed to sell the house, and then he wasn't even allowing her to do that. Having all that taken away from her just made her snap.
Sherry left her home in Pennsylvania shortly after midnight on September 29th, 2021. She went to Surf City and arrived at that home at 4:58 a.m. She went inside, shot both Jack Enders and Francois Pitois.
Francois is then stabbed 17 times in the bed, because we do see those stab wounds through the sheets. So at that point, she gets up. We see a trail of blood from upstairs to downstairs on the steps. Jack was led downstairs. He then ends up in a chair, and that's where he's stabbed 51 times.
He had defensive wounds on the arms and hands. Nothing in the back. So she was looking at her father when she did this.
Then she stabbed my mom another 22 more times on the stairs.
Jack stabbed 51 times, Frenchie 39 times, both shot in the mouth. When the defendant was done, she didn't want to see what she did to her father. She covered him up. She didn't care about Frenchie. She just left Frenchie there.
For the jury, the evidence against Sherry is insurmountable.
They came to the same conclusion that Kristen and I did very early on. Sherry was guilty.
2 months later, at her sentencing hearing, Sherry maintains her claim of innocence.
I really wish I was the one that was killed, and I was the one that was dead. I would give my life today in a heartbeat to spare them.
But the judge isn't buying it.
Judge sentenced her to 2 life terms. In specific years, she has to serve a mandatory minimum of 63 years behind bars.
I tried to make sense of it. Like, why? Like, why would somebody do that to their own parent?
It doesn't make sense. Frenchie and my grandfather definitely did not deserve anything that happened to them.
My mom lit up the room. She was beautiful inside and out. That's the best thing I can say.
And if you knew her, you would love her.
At nighttime, when you go outside and you look up and you see all of the stars out there, that's how I remember both of them, Moms and Jack.
My mom, she was always caring. If you were her friend, she was your friend to the end. Jack had a big heart, and would help anybody he could. I will always be her daughter. The distance between heaven and earth will never change that.
An elderly couple is found murdered in their beachside home.
This was a very bloody crime scene. We're not talking a quick death. It was rage, it was anger.
Most of the stab wounds were to the face, neck, and front of the body.
One victim was stabbed 17 times while still in bed. Why would somebody do this?
According to loved ones, the couple didn't have enemies.
They just got along perfect, and they made each other glow.
They've been together about 15 years, living, like just some very idyllic retirement life.
But video evidence provides a glimpse of the killer.
That surveillance showed an individual who climbs over the picket fence.
We're all looking at this video where, what the heck happened to the car? It doesn't vanish. Where did it go?
And the investigation reveals old hostilities and shifting loyalties that put family bonds to the ultimate test.
One of the first things that you notice is a for sale sign outside.
He changed his will, and the new will left everything to his grandson. Whoever did this was angry with these people and wanted them to know.
Sunday, October 3rd, 2021. It's a peaceful fall morning along the shores of Surf City Beach, New Jersey.
Surf City is a small town on Long Beach Island. Primarily consists of part-time residents.
From Memorial Day to Labor Day, you have the summer people coming down, but during the winter months, it's very quiet.
For Valerie Lewis Evans, the daughter of a local, the quiet is worrying. Though Valerie lives in Virginia, she's been trying to get in touch with her 75-year-old mother, Francois Petois, for several days now with no luck.
I started calling her phone. The way my mom is if she don't call you back that day, she's gonna call you definitely the next day.
Francois lives with her longtime boyfriend, Jack Enders, but neither of them are answering Valerie's calls.
The phone would go straight to answer machine. Then I keep calling and calling. So now I'm starting to get worried.
My sister had called me, and I knew something was wrong, because they talk every day.
Valerie called Surf City Police Department for a welfare check.
Police went to the residence. They knocked on the front door and were not able to make contact with either of the occupants. They then walked around to the back of the residence.
The back door was locked. And when they looked in through that window, they saw what they believed to be a body sitting in a chair. They were able to use basically a tool they would use to open doors and for cars and stuff like that, and pop open the front door.
Before even entering the residence, you start to get that odor of decomposition. As you continue into the house, it obviously becomes more pungent.
There is someone found in a chair. He's covered in clothing. It's pretty apparent that he is deceased. He's been stabbed multiple times.
Based on the physical description of Jack Enders, they were able to make a very educated guess that it was him.
Even for seasoned officers, the crime scene is gruesome. And farther inside the home, they find a second victim.
Evidence at the base of the stairs was the body of Francois.
It's immediately apparent that, there's blood everywhere, that she's been stabbed all over.
They immediately called for CSI and homicide squad.
When I arrive on scene, we conduct an initial walkthrough. We notice blood on the floor in the kitchen. As you step past or over Francois's body and head up the stairs, you see blood swiping down the stairs all the way up into the second floor, and that trail can be followed into the bedroom.
They found 17 what appeared to be slice marks going through the sheet, which we assumed Francois was stabbed 17 times while still in bed before she even got out.
2 9mm casings were found among the bedding.
This was a very bloody crime scene. There was blood, a lot of blood in that bedroom. There was blood going all the way down the stairwell. There were bloody footprints going out of the house.
What this scene was telling us is that the initial encounter was upstairs while Jack and Francois were still in bed. And as it was escalating or continuing, then came downstairs.
As CSI is processing the crime scene, the local police department go to every door in the area and they knock on the door. Say, hey, do you know these people who live here?
We needed to get a little bit more background information on the people that are inside of the house and start to get the biggest idea of who could have done this and why this happened.
Francois Pitois was born in France in December 1945.
My mom was from Great France. My mom was very a beautiful person, and she was very loving and kind.
Beacon of light. That's how I would describe moms. Always laughing, joking. Just like she illuminated wherever she went.
My dad met my mom in France. My dad was military, so he was stationed over there. They met and they hit it off.
They started courting, and eventually they got married. And then they had me.
They went to Germany, and then they had me, and then we wound up in New Jersey. She became a nurse, and she always took care of people. She made sure, like, their room, everything was nice and neat. Always giving and helping out people.
16 years into the marriage, Francois and her husband decided to part ways.
They ended up getting a divorce, but they stayed very admirable with each other.
All the kids were grown. She was still doing nursing, and she got her own place in Browns Mills, New Jersey.
Francois spent over 20 years working in a New Jersey nursing home, but never lost her accent. Patients gave her the affectionate nickname, Frenchie.
And I think it was 2001. She had a friend that she wanted me to meet, and that's when Jack came into the picture. My mom was hanging out at the beach, and a mutual friend introduced them.
Jack Enders was a retired businessman living on the shore.
He had been in the Air Force. He went to Penn State, and he, for many years, ran a very successful construction and building business in the Philadelphia area. Jack was a grandfather. He had 2 adult daughters from his marriage to his lifelong sweetheart.
Jack had a wife that passed away from Alzheimer's, and my mom, dealing with patients and taking care of people, she knew about that stuff, and they just clicked. My mom was short, about 5'1", little petite French lady, and Jack was a tall, giant guy. They just got along perfect, and they made each other glow. You know what I mean?
Francois had her own home, but she spent a lot of her time in that house in Surf City.
We go there for summer, 4th of July a lot. I remember seeing fireworks there with them, and we'd all stay at the house.
They would always cook like all of this seafood for us.
They've been together about 15 years, you know, like just some very idyllic retirement life.
By 2021, Jack and Francois were looking for a change.
Jack wanted to sell the house because they were getting older, and I think he just wanted to get something smaller, maybe one level. His brother and his wife already, you know, moved to Florida, so that was the plan.
But the couple would never get to make their move south a reality. Jack and Francois have become victims of a brutal crime, and New Jersey investigators are determined to find out who is responsible.
One of the first things that you notice is a for sale sign outside. It's the end of September, so again, it's a time where Surf City is largely uninhabited. Is this something where someone took an opportunity to go in and see what they could find, and that they happened to encounter these two individuals?
But there was cash found in the house. That goes against the idea that this was a robbery.
The wounds suffered by the two victims suggest a different motive.
Most of the stab wounds were to the face, neck, and front of the body. She had also stab wounds to her back, as well as a slashing wound across her throat.
So we're not talking once or twice. We're not talking a quick death. For me, it was rage. It was anger. This wasn't business. This wasn't a robbery. This was personal.
Coming up, investigators discover their victims were embroiled in a family feud.
The relationship broke up. They just cut him off completely.
And a suspect is caught on camera.
We were able to actually see what I would call almost like a ghostly figure go by.
Surf City detectives are investigating the brutal murders of Francois Petois and Jack Enders, an elderly couple found stabbed to death in their waterfront home.
The first thought is, who could have done something like this? You start to notice different things about this scene.
Jack Enders was found with clothing covering his face and body. Frenchie was not. He was stabbed in the chair. That's where those injuries were inflicted. Frenchie was stabbed in bed.
We find in these investigations that when it's, you know, someone that is close to someone after they commit these crimes, sometimes they cover them with clothing that they can't, you know, see what they've done.
What that tells us is that whoever committed this act had a closer connection to Jack.
Crime scene technicians comb through the house for further clues.
Once the initial police had responded, our crime scene investigation unit was called.
Directly at the top of the stairs was a bathroom, and in that bathroom, there was blood on the sink.
There was some blood on the counter. There was a towel. So it looks like whoever did this washed up in the guest bathroom.
Samples of blood are collected from surfaces the killer might have touched, along with any prints they left behind.
On the kitchen floor, we do see what appears to be footprints and blood.
We used a chemical called amido black to process the scene, and there were multiple latent impressions that were found. The first thing that we would want to do is take elimination prints from both our female and our male victim. I was then able to compare both of their feet to the print that was lifted at the scene and exclude both our female victim as well as our male victim. There is no database at this time that houses foot impressions. We would have to develop a suspect first, so then we can then obtain that suspect's footprints.
By now, 4 hours have passed since Francois's family requested a welfare check, and her daughter Valerie is beginning to fear the worst.
Nobody's calling me back. My daughter lives in Willingboro, New Jersey. So I called my daughter. I said, Noonie, I'm going to send you the address to Jack. I want you to go over there and see what's going on.
While down at the scene, I was approached by a Surf City patrolman who advised that there was a female that was looking to speak with a detective assigned to the case.
My daughter calls me on FaceTime. I told my daughter to hold up the phone so that I could see the house. And she does. And I tell the police officer, that's Jack's truck. My mom doesn't drive no more. If they go anywhere, they're gonna take Jack's truck. So where are they?
It's tricky at times. We knew who the people were inside the house, but we needed to identify them in a medically appropriate manner before notifying them, the family members, of the death.
I asked Noonie if she minded if we go back to headquarters to do a formal sit down and interview her, which she agreed to.
At the Surf City police station, Valerie's daughter tells detectives everything she knows.
We try to get a little information on the family dynamic, keeping that in mind, that whoever committed this act may have had a closer connection to Jack. And we learned that Jack has 2 daughters, both of which are in Pennsylvania.
According to Noonie, Jack and his daughters, Sherry and Terry, had become estranged over the years.
Both his daughters weren't talking to him, and he's just like, I don't know what happened. He felt bad because he didn't know why.
The relationship between him and Terry broke up because of her and her husband's relationship. They cut him off, just cut him off completely.
The falling out with Sherry was the result of multiple events, including an apparent betrayal of Francois.
Any holidays, my mom would send cards, and she sends Sherry a card with $200. So she calls me up, and she's crying and everything, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? She says Sherry took the $200 check and changed it into a $2,000 check. Nothing never came of it because Jack wound up, paying my mom back for that check. But this threw their relationship apart.
We try not to be too influenced when somebody says, oh, this person hated him or they hated each other. People's opinions, people's positions, things of that nature are just not relevant. What's relevant is the evidence.
At this point, what we don't have is something concrete that says this was Sherry Heffernan. And when you're dealing with something as heinous as a double murder, you want to make sure that you get it right.
After interviewing the granddaughter of Francois Petois, detectives have their first lead on who her killer might be. Jack Ender's 55-year-old daughter, Sherry Heffernan.
While Jack has 2 daughters, Terry has been estranged from the family for a number of years. The other daughter, Sherry, still has ties to Jack, but as of late had been having a falling out with him.
Sherry and her dad were having a difficult time. But we want to make sure the evidence dictates where we go with our investigation. We talked to everybody in this case. any friends we can find, any family members, just to build a bio on these people.
Sherry was the youngest of two. My mother was the older one.
Sherry had one son. She was divorced. She had worked as a real estate agent. I believe she had done some financial work. Her and her dad had been business partners, it appeared, over the years with different ventures.
Jack had been trying to sell this house for quite some time now. In fact, he had listed it at least once before and used his daughter Sherry as the listing agent because she was a realtor.
She was in charge of doing it, but it never got sold, and I think my grandfather got frustrated by that.
Frustrated enough that he hired a different agent to handle the sale, a decision that upset Sherry.
She wanted to be the one to sell it.
As investigators take a closer look at Sherry, on October 4th, the medical examiner officially confirms the couple's identities and the family is notified.
I answered the door, and the police officer said that they're gone. They're no longer here. And I just immediately started crying.
While the family processes the news, investigators look to the autopsy for more answers.
The autopsy revealed that Francois was stabbed 39 times all over her back and her neck. Jack had been stabbed 51 times.
Both sides of his jaw were broken, but it wasn't until the autopsy of Francois that they noted the clear bullet hole through her jaw, which then made them take Jack back out. And when they reconstructed his jaw, they could clearly see it was a bullet.
The forensic pathologist was able to determine the gunshot wounds were from a close distance.
From that point, we believe that Jack was led down the stairs at gunpoint after being shot in the face and led to that chair where he was ultimately found.
Most of his stab and slash wounds were in the front, as well as his arms, as he was trying to defend himself at that point, sitting in the chair.
While whoever is committing this crime is inflicting these stab wounds now upon Jack, we believe that Francois actually survived and made her way down the stairs.
Whoever did this could have shot him in the temple. That would have been fatal. But this was somebody who was angry with these people and wanted them to know that they were angry with them.
The autopsy findings also reveal a timeline for the murder.
The bodies were what I would call in the early stages of decomposition, which indicated to us we couldn't just look at October 3rd. Even October 2nd, we had to go back as far as we could.
Officers made me aware of a video that existed that was recorded from a neighboring residence's surveillance system.
When our detectives reviewed it, we found that on September 29th, a surveillance camera was able to pick up a white Winnebago.
We see the vehicle drive down North 7th Street in the direction of the victim's home shortly before 5 a.m.
We see this vehicle pull up, park. Approximately an hour later, we see the vehicle moving. The lights are turned off at one point.
As we continue to watch the surveillance, that vehicle leaves that area approximately 50 minutes later at approximately 5:50 a.m. And an individual is seen a short time later walking back towards the victim residence.
And we were able to actually see what I would call almost like a ghostly figure go by. I mean, this is 5 a.m. in the morning. It's dark.
After a brief search, detectives find another security camera, and it provides a better view of their suspect leaving the victim's house 2 hours later.
That surveillance showed an individual who goes over to the bay, climbs over the white little picket fence there, goes over into the neighbor's yard, and begins walking away. That individual had a hood up, appeared to be wearing clothing and shoes that were just too big for them, carrying, something yellow in their hand, and we do find blood, Francois' blood, on that fence.
Looking at the height of the fence, they appeared to be about 5'8", 5'9", 5'7", somewhere in there. We believe that this person was most likely our murder suspect.
I wasn't gonna quit until we found out who it was, and they were in jail for the rest of their lives.
Hours into the investigation of Jack Ender's and Francois Petois' violent deaths, detectives have caught a glimpse of the killer. But whoever it is took extra precautions not to be recognized.
It appeared that this person who committed the murders took Jack's clothes and wore them out of the house. And that's why the clothes appeared to be so big on them.
We do not know at this point whether it's a male or a female. All that we're able to tell is whoever did this is approximately 5'8". We also know that the person that committed this act arrived in the Winnebago.
Now we know more between the hours of, say, 3:45 in the morning till after 7 o'clock in the morning on the 29th. Can't pull every surveillance camera on the island, but it's a barrier island. You're going over a bridge to get there. There's one way in and one way out.
That bridge has cameras, so we start looking at this camera, the eastbound camera, coming onto Long Beach Island.
Sure enough, we see the Winnebago come over the bridge. But then we don't see it get to the other side. So we're all looking at this video, what the heck happened to the car? It's a Winnebago, it doesn't vanish. Where did it go?
That vehicle, as we continue to watch the surveillance, leaves that area around 7 a.m., headed westbound.
Investigators aren't able to make out a license plate from the footage. But if their suspicions about the killer are correct, they don't need one to locate the vehicle.
I searched for Sherry and was able to find an old license for Sherry with Sherry Enders as the name. Using that driver's license, I was able to locate a New Jersey registration. And that New Jersey registration came back to a 2003 Winnebago.
While it doesn't prove Sherry was the one who committed the murders, her connection to the RV makes it imperative that detectives find her and bring her in for questioning.
Authorities find that Sherry lives outside of Philadelphia, and they contact the Pennsylvania State Police.
Pennsylvania State Police drive by the residence and let us know that the Winnebago is parked in the driveway of that residence.
While Pennsylvania police set up surveillance at Sherry's home, New Jersey detectives travel to meet them.
We meet up with the Pennsylvania State Police, who says there hasn't been anyone coming or going from the house, but there is a truck parked in the house. A short while after arriving, that truck leaves the residence. We ask Pennsylvania State Police to follow the vehicle, and Pennsylvania conducts that motor vehicle stop. They're able to identify the driver as J.J. Heffernan, who is the son of Sherry Heffernan. From that point, JJ is asked to come down and asked to provide a taped statement to speak about the family dynamic. While we're speaking with JJ, the officers that were conducting surveillance on Sherry's home have now decided to move forward.
We located a active warrant for Sherry Heffernan out of Norristown, Pennsylvania.
So they approach the house and they call her out on a PA system under the strength of an unrelated warrant.
She did come out when she was ordered to, and she was arrested.
News of Sherry's arrest sends shockwaves through the families of Jack and Francois.
I was surprised at first when they were going to investigate her. I thought they were close. What would her reasons be?
And what kind of daughter does that to her own dad? She had that much hatred for her dad and my mom? They didn't do nothing.
Coming up, investigators obtain a warrant for Sherry's property.
We found ammunition that was the same as the shell casings found at the scene. And we had her Winnebago on video surveillance.
And the killer's true motive becomes clear.
I heard that he told her that he was taking her out of his will.
Having all that taken away from her just made her snap.
After connecting Sherry Heffernan to the murder of her father and his girlfriend, detectives arrest Sherry and bring her 22-year-old son JJ in for questioning.
We ultimately were able to rule her son out as a suspect through his phone records, which placed him in Maryland at the time these crimes were committed.
Sherry's son was also about 6'2", 6'3". The person in this picture is about 5'8", and a slender build. Nobody in the families matched that description except for Sherry.
And JJ can't rule out the possibility that it was his mother.
He provides us with limited information, but important information. Specifically that Sherry Heffernan owns and operates a Winnebago.
Also, he explains some of the family dynamic, that he and Sherry believe that Francois is a gold digger and that they blame her for their grandfather wanting to sell the house.
After gaining more insight from JJ's interview, investigators turn their attention to Sherry.
She's placed in an interview room. She has read her rights, at which point she invokes her right to have an attorney present.
She does not give a statement. However, the officers are able to collect a DNA swab from her. We get a search warrant for that Winnebago and for her residence, just to see again if we can find some evidence connecting her or someone else to this crime.
When that warrant is executed, this Winnebago that has been the vehicle of interest in this case, we were able to see some red staining almost immediately in the driver's compartment of that vehicle.
As the vehicle is transported back to New Jersey for further analysis, investigators focus on Sherry's residence.
When we searched Sherry's house, we found ammunition that was the same as the shell casings found at the scene, and we found a receipt for a gun. It was a receipt for a 9mm. Turned out to be the same type of gun most likely used to inflict these injuries. Every other gun she had lawfully purchased, we found in that house. We didn't find that one.
During the execution of the search warrant, we also noticed a surveillance system that is on the outside of the residence.
While investigators pull the footage, they also obtain a warrant for Sherry's cell phone.
The cell phone was very important. We were able to map it.
We're able to see that she leaves her residence at sometime after midnight, near the 1 o'clock hour on September 29th.
Driving all the way up to the Pennsylvania Turnpike Bridge, she crosses the Delaware there, then comes all the way down to basically Route 72 eventually, which is the main artery going through Manahawkin into Long Beach Island, and crosses the bridge. And this became important because we had her Winnebago on video surveillance going over this bridge. We were able to show that she actually turned when she got over the bridge early. We talked to the local police and they said, yeah, that's a shortcut known by locals that avoids a couple lights.
She arrives at Jack and Francois' residence at approximately 4:58 a.m., and her cell phone is turned off a short while later.
We have nothing else on that phone until it starts being used again at around 9 a.m. in Pennsylvania. So it appears she got to the scene and turned her phone off.
We're able to then track her back into Landenberg, ultimately until she arrives at her home right in the evening hours of September 29th.
And when investigators access the home's surveillance footage, they notice something about Sherry.
While looking through that footage, I saw Sherry Heffernan returning home that day on the 29th. I believe it was 7:53 p.m., if I remember correctly. She later goes back to the Winnebago and removes some items that look very similar to what she was seen carrying when she left the residence in Surf City.
And one of the things we were able to see is she was barefoot. And it was important because there were bloody footprints going out the front door at the crime scene.
Once Miss Heffernan was arrested, I was then able to go and obtain her foot impressions. And I was able to then confirm that, in fact, the bloody foot impressions were Miss Heffernan's. At that point, I had no doubt in my mind that we had the right person.
Now we have to prove this defendant's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Why would a daughter kill her father and his girlfriend in such a brutal way? Why would this person do this?
Within the quiet, almost idyllic tapestry of Surf City Beach, New Jersey, a horrifying stain emerged, disrupting the peaceful cadence of autumn. The brutal double homicide of 75-year-old Jack Enders and a 75-year-old girlfriend, Francois Patois, in their waterfront home sent shockwaves far beyond the island's tranquil shores. This was not a crime of opportunity, not a random act of violence. The sheer intensity of the attack spoke volumes of a deeply personal fury. As a criminal psychology analyst and a writer accustomed to dissecting the human psyche in its darkest manifestation, the unfolding narrative of this tragedy offered chilling, yet profoundly educational case study and motive, perceived entitlement, and the ultimate shattering of familial bonds. It is a story that, through the meticulous work of law enforcement and the unwavering pursuit of justice, reveals the insidious ways resentment can fester, ultimately leading to unthinkable acts. The initial reports were stark, painting a picture of overwhelming violence. After footprints were discovered at the scene of the brutal double homicide, 55-year-old Sherry Heffernan, Jack's own daughter, was charged with the murders of her father, Jack Enders, and his girlfriend, Francois Patois. As her trial date approached, prosecutors, with diligent persistence, secured additional evidence to solidify their compelling narrative for the jury. One such crucial piece of information revolved around a crimson staining observed on a door within the victim's home. The simple sight of a reddish hue, often indicative of life's essential fluid, instantly heightens the gravitas of any criminal investigation, prompting rigorous forensic examination. Ultimately and decisively, analysis of samples collected from 2 specific doorknobs yielded profoundly significant deoxyribonucleic acid results. These results confirmed the presence of genetic material belonging to both Sherry Heffernan and her father, Jack. The findings were not merely circumstantial. They were scientifically conclusive, indicating a direct physical interaction with critical surfaces at the very core of the crime scene by the accused to the investigative team and, by extension, the prosecution. These deoxyribonucleic acid results seem to construct an almost inescapable argument, appearing to demonstrate that Sherry was a singular individual whose genetic presence was undeniable at such critical points of interaction within the house. This highly compelling forensic evidence contributed substantially to the prosecution's burgeoning conviction that they had indeed identified the correct perpetrator. However, as the formal proceedings of the trial commenced in the brisk month of February 2024, Sherry's legal representatives launched a vigorous defense. They adamantly insisted that the law enforcement agencies, despite their painstaking efforts, had mistakenly arrested the wrong person. The defense's strategic narrative aimed to cast doubt upon the physical capability of their client, painting a portrait of an individual physically unsuited to perpetrate such a brutal and demanding act of violence. One of the central tenets of this defense strategy was the assertion that their client was a 50-something-year-old woman, thereby implying she was not physically capable of carrying out such a ferocious and sustained attack against two individuals. This argument sought to exploit common societal preconceptions regarding physical strength and the likely profile of perpetrators in violent crimes, attempting to pivot the jury's focus away from Sherry. However, the prosecution, with an incisive rebuttal, masterfully dismantled this assertion. They presented to the jury a video recording, a piece of visual evidence that strikingly depicted Sherry Heffernan engaging in a physically demanding activity, pushing a small boat on a trailer. This seemingly innocuous video clip served as a powerful counter-narrative, starkly illustrating that someone who possesses the physical strength and exertion required to propel a boat, albeit a small one, on a trailer is not inherently or automatically physically incapable of committing a violent act. The imagery provided a tangible, irrefutable demonstration of her physical capacity, effectively undermining one of the defense's primary contentions. It highlighted the deceptive nature of assumptions and underscored the prosecution's commitment to exposing the full, unvarnished truth. The prosecution furthermore augmented their formidable evidentiary presentation by meticulously countering other defensive claims and, critically, by highlighting what they argued was Sherry's potent and deeply personal motive. With meticulous diligence, they were able to demonstrate convincingly at trial that Jack, the elder victim, did possess a legal will, a testamentary document that, in its past iterations, had designated Sherry as the sole beneficiary, poised to inherit everything. This past arrangement set a clear baseline for the daughter's expectations and financial future, as perceived by her. Then came the pivotal, tragic turning point. In the month of April 2021, Jack executed a fundamental and dramatic alteration to his last will and testament. The newly drafted will entirely reconfigured the previous distribution of his assets, now designating his grandson, Andrew, as the exclusive recipient of his entire estate. This act, whether fully understood by Sherry or not at the precise moment it occurred, marked a profound shift in her expected inheritance and, as the prosecution contended, her perceived standing within her father's regard. This alteration would become the gravitational center of the prosecution's motive argument, positing a seismic emotional and financial betrayal that could have triggered an extreme reaction. A witness, whose identity is not disclosed in the provided text, but whose account proved significant to the investigation, provided a chilling insight into the escalating tension within the family dynamic. The witness stated, "Sherry, I believe that her and her dad got into an argument, and I heard that he told her that he was taking her out of his will." This statement, conveyed as a direct overheard account, painted a vivid picture of a deeply acrimonious confrontation. It provided an audible, specific incident where the threat of disinheritance was explicitly articulated, offering the jury a concrete moment of significant dispute. The witness, at the time of this information being relayed, also conceded a personal lack of sophisticated understanding regarding legal testamentary documents, acknowledging, "I didn't know anything about wills or stuff at the time, so I didn't know who would benefit from it." However, despite this admitted lack of legal expertise, the witness intuitively grasped a crucial detail of the family's entangled affairs. But the only person that was tied to that house at the time was Sherry. This observation highlighted Sherry's inherent, enduring connection to the property, a connection that extended beyond mere familial ties. The house, an asset central to her father's estate, was not just a home but a potential future inheritance, a source of income, or perhaps even a symbol of security for her. Furthermore, the witness added a layer of grievance to Sherry's plight, noting that she was supposed to sell the house, and then he wasn't even allowing her to do that. This statement underscored a profound sense of thwarted agency and financial impediment, Jack's refusal to allow her to sell the property, presumably after some previous agreement or expectation, coupled with a dramatic revision of his will, created a deeply fertile ground for intense resentment. The emotional and practical ramifications of having control over the property, and potentially its associated profits, suddenly and unilaterally rescinded, further amplified the burgeoning animosity. The witness then offered a poignant psychological deduction, stating, having all that taken away from her just made her snap. This colloquial yet powerful phrase succinctly captured the essence of the prosecution's motive: a sudden, explosive break from emotional equilibrium triggered by a cascade of perceived betrayals and financial dispossessions. From a criminal psychological perspective, such a confluence of events, perceived rejection, loss of status, and significant financial deprivation, can indeed serve as a formidable catalyst for acts of extreme violence, especially when fueled by a history of unresolved family conflict and a sense of entitlement. The detailed reconstruction of Sherry's movements prior to and during the tragic event further bolstered the prosecution's case, painting a grim picture of calculated premeditation followed by brutal execution. Sherry left her residence in Pennsylvania shortly after the stroke of midnight on September 29, 2021, embarking on a clandestine journey under the cover of darkness. Her travel trajectory ultimately led her to the Surf City home, where she arrived at 4:58 a.m., precisely when the world was still cloaked in the pre-dawn stillness, a time ripe for covert operations. Upon entering the residence, the prosecution alleged, she methodically proceeded to inflict fatal injuries, discharging a firearm against both Jack Enders and Francois Patois. This act initiated a horrific sequence of events. The ferocity of the attack became gruesomely apparent in the forensic findings. Francois was stabbed a staggering 17 times while she lay vulnerable in bed, a detail evidenced by the visible stab wounds penetrating through the sheets, indicating the unyielding nature of the assault. At that point, following or amidst the attack on Francois, the assailant, believed to be Sherry, moved from the upstairs bedroom. The path she traversed bore silent, bloody witness to the horrific events that had just unfolded. A distinct trail of blood, clearly discernible, descended from the upstairs area to the downstairs, marking each step. Jack, the father, was then forced to move from the upper floor. He was led downstairs, likely under duress, culminating in his tragic end while seated in a chair. In this vulnerable position, he was subjected to an unfathomable 51 stab wounds. The forensic analysis of his body revealed critical details about his final moments. He bore clear defensive wounds on his arms and hands, indicative of his desperate attempts to ward off the attack, to protect himself from the onslaught. Significantly, there were no stab wounds discovered on his back, a detail that strongly suggested he was facing his attacker throughout the duration of the brutal assault. This particular piece of evidence allowed for a chilling deduction. So she was looking at her father when she did this, a statement that powerfully underscored the deeply personal, face-to-face nature of the rage fueling the attack. It implies a confrontation, an active engagement with the victim during the act, rather than a cowardly attack from behind. This visual confirmation of direct confrontation painted a picture of unadulterated fury, adding another layer of horror to the already unspeakable violence. A family member's subsequent statement offered a poignant yet disturbing recounting of a further, assaults, stating, "Then she stabbed my mom another 22 more times on the stairs." While the exact timing and sequence relative to Francois' initial 17 stab wounds in bed or Jack's 51 stab wounds in the chair are subject to interpretation from the provided text, this statement indicates an additional, distinct phase of extreme violence directed at the victim referred to as "my mom." It underscores the prolonged, multi-locational nature of the attacks, further demonstrating the relentless, almost frenzied character of the violence. The accumulation of these horrific acts culminated in a final tally that emphasized the sheer savagery. Jack stabbed 51 times, Frenchie, the affectionate nickname for Francois, 39 times in total when combining all assaults, and a full gunshot wound to mouth for Francois. This catalog of injuries spoke volumes about the perpetrator's intent, not just to kill, but to inflict extreme pain, degradation, and terror, actions highly indicative of a crime driven by overwhelming rage and deep-seated animosity. Once the defendant had concluded her horrifying acts, a telling detail emerged regarding her selective post-mortem interactions with her victims, a detail profoundly significant for psychological analysis. It was noted that when the defendant was done, she didn't want to see what she did to her father. She covered him up. This act of covering the body of Jack Enders suggests a flicker of lingering connection, perhaps a momentary, subconscious recognition of the paternal bond that had been irrevocably severed by her own hand. It could stem from a desire to mitigate the immediate visual impact of her brutality, an attempt to distance herself emotionally or psychologically from the full horror of her deed, or even a subconscious expression of a residual, twisted form of remorse or grief, even if fleeting. This selective gesture stood in stark contrast to her apparent disregard for the other victim. She didn't care about Frenchie. She just left Frenchie there. This blatant difference in treatment, leaving Francois' body uncovered, brutally highlights the stark dichotomy of the perpetrator's emotional connection, or lack thereof, to each victim. It reinforces the idea that the core of the perpetrator's rage and deeply personal vendetta was unequivocally directed towards Jack, with Francois possibly becoming a tragic casualty in a paroxysm of familial animosity. This differential treatment profoundly informed the investigators' understanding of the primary victim-offender relationship and the deep psychological roots of the crime. For the 12 members of the jury presented with this formidable cascade of forensic evidence, eyewitness testimony, and logical deduction, the case against Sherry was ultimately rendered insurmountable. The volume, consistency, and interlocking nature of the evidence created a mosaic of guilt that was exceptionally difficult to refute. Ultimately, they arrived at the same inescapable conclusion that both Kristen and the unnamed narrator had reached very early on in their professional assessment of the case. Sherry was guilty. This unanimity in judgment, both among seasoned investigators and impartial jurors, underscored the robustness and undeniable power of the prosecution's meticulously constructed case. 2 months later, during her poignant sentencing hearing, Sherry Heffernan steadfastly maintained her unwavering claim of innocence. In a chilling moment of declared self-pity, or perhaps a desperate plea for empathy, she uttered, "I really wish I was the one that was killed. I was the one that was dead. I could give my life today in a heartbeat to spare them." Such pronouncements, though outwardly expressing remorse or regret, often ring hollow to legal and psychological professionals when juxtaposed against the overwhelming evidence of calculated, brutal actions. To the detached observer, these words frequently appear as a final, manipulative attempt to control the narrative, to elicit sympathy, and to deflect accountability, rather than a genuine admission of guilt or acceptance of responsibility for the profound devastation wrought. They represent a cognitive dissonance, a profound inability or unwillingness to internalize the moral gravity of her actions. However, the seasoned presiding judge, having meticulously overseen the entire legal process, from pre-trial motions to the jury's verdict, was not swayed by these last-ditch assertions. The judge's decision was firm. reflective of the court's grave determination and irrefutable weight of justice. The judge sentenced her to 2 life terms, signifying the unparalleled severity of her crimes. To further underscore the unwavering commitment of the justice system to hold her accountable for an extended period, the sentencing included a specific mandate. She would be compelled to serve a mandatory minimum of 63 years behind bars before even becoming eligible for any consideration of parole. This extraordinary term was designed to ensure that the punishment would fit the heinous nature of the double murder, effectively ensuring she would spend the vast remainder of her natural life incarcerated, serving as a solemn testament to the irreparable damage she had inflicted. For the victim's loved ones, the struggle for comprehension persisted long after the verdict and sentencing. I tried to make sense of it, one family member lamented. Why? Why would somebody do that to their own parent? It doesn't make sense. This plaintive question echoes a profound human inability to rationalize parricide, especially when driven by apparent greed or festering resentment. The act itself often shatters fundamental societal and familial taboos, leaving survivors grappling with a void of understanding that logic cannot fill. The victim's relatives then offered a heartfelt remembrance, articulating the immense and undeserved suffering endured by the deceased. Frenchie and my grandfather definitely did not deserve anything that happened to them. This simple yet powerful statement underscored a profound injustice of their brutal end, reinforcing their innocence and the senselessness of the violence. The profound grief found an outlet in tender, beautiful recollections of the lives extinguished. My mom lit up the room. She was beautiful inside and out. That's the only best thing I can say. And if you knew her, you would love her. These words painted a vivid, affectionate portrait of Francois Patois, honoring her vibrant spirit and the warmth she extended to those around her, celebrating the very essence of her being that was so cruelly taken. Another relative articulated a poetic and enduring memory of both victims. At nighttime, when you go outside and you look up and you see all the stars out there, that's how I remember both of them, Mom Zay and Jack. This poignant metaphor elevated their memories to an ethereal, omnipresent realm, ensuring that their spirits would forever shine bright against the vast canvas of existence. They added further loving attributes. My mom, she was always caring. If you were her friend, she was your friend to the end. Jack had a big heart, and would help anybody he could. These words describe lives dedicated to warmth, loyalty, and generosity, highlighting the tragic irony of their demise at the hands of someone who should have embodied kinship. Finally, a daughter's unwavering devotion transcended even death's barrier. I will always be her daughter. The distance between heaven and earth will never change that. This powerful affirmation underscored the enduring, unbreakable bond of love that perseveres beyond physical separation, a testament to the indelible mark the victims left on the hearts of their loved ones. The horrifying discovery in Surf City marked the beginning of an intense and complex investigation. An elderly couple, found brutally murdered in their beachside home, immediately raised critical questions for seasoned law enforcement professionals. The crime scene itself was a testament to extreme violence, a visceral tableau that unequivocally indicated the nature of the confrontation. This was a very bloody crime scene, a statement that carries immense weight for forensic experts. Implies a protracted and fierce struggle, not a swift surgical execution. We're not talking a quick death. Further emphasizes a sustained brutality. From a criminal psychological standpoint, the nature of such extensive violence often speaks of deep-seated emotional undercurrents, betraying motives far more complex than simple robbery or opportunism. It was rage. It was anger, directly articulated the emotional signature left behind by the perpetrator, a raw, uncontrolled fury that suggested an intimate, personal connection between the assailant and the victims. The distribution of the wounds offered crucial insight. Most of the stab wounds were to the face, neck, and front of the body. This pattern of injury typically signifies a face-to-face confrontation, a direct expression of malice aimed at the person's identity and life force. The specific detail that one victim was stabbed 17 times while still in bed speaks to an element of surprise and vulnerability, further illustrating the perpetrator's mercilessness. Such a horrific event inevitably prompts the agonizing question, why would somebody do this? Especially when, according to loved ones, the couple, Jack and Francois, did not possess enemies. Their shared existence was characterized by harmony and mutual affection. They just got along perfect, and they made each other glow, painting a picture of a loving, tranquil partnership. Their 15-year companionship had been one of living, like just some very idyllic retirement life. A life devoid of outward conflict that could explain such a violent end. Yet, lurking beneath the seemingly calm surface was a turbulent undercurrent, soon to be unearthed. The initial investigation, relying heavily on cutting-edge surveillance technology, offered a chilling, albeit obscured, glimpse of the killer. A specific video, critical to breaking the case open, captured a figure moving stealthily. That surveillance showed an individual who climbs over picket fence, suggesting an attempt at stealth, avoiding direct entry. The inexplicable disappearance of a vehicle and subsequent footage pose a perplexing mystery. We're all looking at this video. What the heck happened to the car? It doesn't vanish. Where did it go? This apparent vanishing act would later prove to be a crucial investigative puzzle. As the arduous investigation deepened, it meticulously uncovered a complex web of old hostilities and shifting loyalties that put family bonds to the ultimate test. These were not strangers committing a random act. This was deeply rooted within the familial sphere, a betrayal of the highest order. The visible for sale sign out outside the victim's home became an early, telling detail, pointing to financial implications and potential motives. And then the definitive revelation regarding the will. He changed his will, and the new will left everything to his grandson. This change represented a seismic shift in expected inheritance, an act that, from a psychological perspective, could trigger extreme feelings of rejection and entitlement in a potential heir. The ultimate assessment of the crime echoed the initial observations of raw fury. Whoever did this was angry with these people and wanted them to know. This was an act of personal vengeance, a deeply felt transgression, delivered with merciless finality. The narrative rhythm now carries us to the peaceful backdrop of a fall morning along the serene shores of Surf City Beach, New Jersey. Surf City itself is described as a small town situated on Long Beach Island, predominantly inhabited by part-time residents. Its character shifts dramatically with the seasons. From Memorial Day to Labor Day, you have the summer people coming down, but during the winter months, it's very quiet. It was in this pronounced quietude, this lull between bustling seasons, that an unease began to settle for Valerie Lewis Evans, the daughter of the local resident, Francois Patois. Valerie found the uncharacteristic silence worrying. Although Valerie herself resided in the distant state of Virginia, she had been making concerted attempts to establish contact with her 75-year-old mother for several days, all without success. Her mother's usual responsiveness made the lack of communication particularly alarming. The way my mom is if she don't call you back that day, she's going to call you definitely the next day. The established pattern of regular, comforting contact had been abruptly broken. Francois lived with her longtime boyfriend, Jack Enders, but neither of them were responding to Valerie's persistent calls. The pattern was consistently unnerving. The phone will go straight to answer machine, then I keep calling and calling. So now I'm starting to get worried. The concern quickly escalated beyond personal worry when her sister, a daily communicator with Francois, also called, expressing alarm. My sister had called me, and I knew something was wrong, because they talk every day. The collective silence from both Francois and Jack, coupled with their consistent failure to return calls, cemented Valerie's growing apprehension. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Valerie promptly contacted the Surf City Police Department to request a welfare check, setting in motion the chain of events that would uncover the brutal truth. Upon receiving the welfare check request, Surf City police officers were dispatched to the residence of Jack Enders and Francois Patois. Their initial approach to the front door yielded no response, and they were unable to make direct contact with either of the occupants. Deepening the immediate sense of foreboding, the officers then proceeded to circumnavigate the residence, moving to the rear, where they discovered the back door was securely locked. This lack of access did not deter them. Through a window, they were able to peer inside, and it was then that a horrifying sight materialized. They observed what they believed to be a body, unmistakably deceased, sitting motionless in a chair. This discovery immediately transformed the welfare check into a full-blown homicide investigation. Reacting swiftly, the officers utilized a tool commonly employed to unlock vehicle doors in emergencies, effectively gaining entry through the front door of the residence. Before even fully stepping across the threshold, the officers were confronted by an undeniable, chilling indicator of prolonged tragedy. Before even entering the residence, you start to get that odor of decomposition. This distinct and pervasive smell, unmistakable to seasoned law enforcement, signaled that the tragedy had transpired some time ago, pushing back the timeline of the incident. As they cautiously ventured deeper into the house, the odor naturally intensified, becoming obviously more pungent, further affirming the grim reality. The sight that awaited them inside was profoundly disturbing. There is someone found in a chair. This figure was disconcertingly covered in clothing, an act that, while seemingly an attempt to conceal, later provided a crucial psychological insight into the perpetrator's mind. The state of the body made it pretty apparent that he is deceased, leaving no room for doubt. The multiple stab wounds visible on the body further emphasized the violent nature of the death. Based on the physical description known to local law enforcement of Jack Enders, the primary occupant, they were able to form a very educated guess that it was him. Even for officers accustomed to the grittier realities of police work, the crime scene was described as profoundly gruesome, bearing the undeniable hallmarks of intense violence. As they delved deeper into the home, their grim search uncovered a second victim, solidifying the double homicide. It's at the base of the stairs is the body of Francois. The scene surrounding her was equally, if not more, horrific. It was immediately apparent that, there's blood everywhere, that she'd been stabbed all over. This chaotic tableau of extreme violence left no question about the brutality of her end. Recognizing the gravity and complexity of the scene, the initial responders promptly initiated the standard protocol, which included an immediate call for the specialized expertise of the Crime Scene Investigation Unit, and the Homicide Squad, thus mobilizing the full weight of investigative resources. Upon the arrival of the specialized investigative teams, a meticulous initial walkthrough was conducted by the leading personnel. This critical first phase of scene processing allowed investigators to gain an immediate, holistic understanding of the scope and nature of the crime. During this walkthrough, crucial details began to emerge, forming a narrative of the events. We noticed blood on the floor in the kitchen, indicating movement and interaction within that central living space. As the team proceeded past or carefully over the body of Francois and ascended the staircase, the extent of the violence became even more apparent. You see blood swiping down the stairs all the way up into the second floor, and that trail can be followed into the bedroom. This widespread distribution of genetic material spoke volumes, charting the relentless progression of the attack and suggesting a primary encounter upstairs. Within the master bedroom, the forensic team made a critical discovery that highlighted the initial ferocity of the assault. They found evidence consistent with 17 wounds, exhibiting what appeared to be slice marks that had penetrated directly through the bed sheets. This led to the harrowing yet logical deduction that we assumed Francois was stabbed 17 times while still in bed, before she even got out. The victim had been targeted in her most vulnerable state, without a chance to escape her resting place. Furthermore, the presence of 2 9mm shell casings found amidst the bedding provided irrefutable proof that a firearm had been discharged at this very location, underscoring the initial lethal aggression. This was a very bloody crime scene, a statement reiterated by multiple investigators, truly capturing the overwhelming visual reality. There was blood, a lot of blood in that bedroom. This heavy concentration confirmed the central, initial site of the brutal attack. The trail of violence did not end there. There was blood going all the way down the stairwell, chronicling a desperate descent or forced movement, further intertwining the events of both floors. Critically, there were bloody footprints going out of the house, which became a pivotal piece of evidence, providing a direct link to the assailant's presence and exit. The sum of this meticulous scene analysis allowed investigators to construct a preliminary, yet powerful, narrative of the crime's initiation and unfolding. What this scene was telling us is that the initial encounter was upstairs while Jack and Francois were still in bed, and as it was escalating or continuing, then came downstairs. This established a clear progression of events, from an initial, perhaps surprise, attack in the bedroom to a more prolonged and violent confrontation that moved throughout the house, concluding with a horrific discovery in the living areas. Concurrently with the detailed crime scene processing by CSI, the local police department initiated a crucial boots-on-the-ground intelligence gathering operation. Officers embarked on a systematic canvass, approaching every door in the immediate vicinity to engage with residents. The objective was straightforward. Hey, do you know these people who live here? We needed to get a little bit more background information on the people that are inside of the house and start to get the biggest idea of who could have done this and why this happened. This door-to-door inquiry is a fundamental component of any homicide investigation, serving to gather neighborhood intelligence, identify potential witnesses, and construct a social and behavioral profile of the victims and their surroundings. It aims to paint a preliminary picture of potential friend circles, conflicts, or unusual occurrences that might offer early leads regarding the motive and the identity of the perpetrator. Francois Patois, whose life was so brutally cut short, was a woman of vibrant heritage. Born in France in December of 1945, her daughter fondly remembered her as a beacon of warmth and light. My mom was from great France. My mom was a beautiful person, and she was very loving and kind. These descriptors paint a portrait of a woman radiating positive energy and affection. Another testament to her vibrant spirit was offered by a family member who affectionately called her a beacon of light. That's how I would describe moms. Always laughing, joking, just like she illuminated wherever she went. Such descriptions highlight her captivating personality and the joy she brought to those around her. Her early life was characterized by a cross-cultural romance. My dad met my mom in France. My dad was military, so he was stationed over there. Their connection blossomed, evolving into a courtship and ultimately culminating in marriage. Following their union, they embarked on a new chapter of their lives, moving to Germany where they had me, referring to one of their children. Their journey then led them to New Jersey, establishing roots in a new country. Francois embarked on a career in nursing, a profession that perfectly aligned with her compassionate nature. She became a nurse, and she always took care of people. She made sure, like their room, everything was nice and neat, always giving and helping out people. These words describe a dedicated caregiver, attentive to the comfort and well-being of others, embodying a spirit of selfless service. After 16 years of marriage, Francois and her husband made the difficult decision to part ways, concluding their marital journey. Despite their divorce, their mutual respect endured, indicating a mature and amicable separation. They stayed very admirable with each other. As her children matured into adulthood, she continued her dedicated career in nursing and established her own residence in Browns Mills, New Jersey. Throughout her professional life, spanning over 2 decades in a New Jersey nursing home, she retained an endearing characteristic of her heritage. She never lost her accent, her patients drawn to her warmth and unique charm, affectionately bestowed upon her the nickname Frenchie, a term of endearment that reflected her identity and beloved presence. The introduction of Jack Enders into Francois's life marked a new chapter, facilitated by a mutual friend. I think it was 2001. She had a friend that she wanted me to meet, and that's when Jack came into the picture. Their connection blossomed during a casual encounter. My mom was hanging out at the beach, and a mutual friend introduced them. Jack Enders, a retired businessman with a background in the Air Force, hailed from a life of professional accomplishment. He was an alumnus of Penn State and, for many years, had successfully operated a very successful construction and building business in the Philadelphia area. Jack was also a family man, a grandfather to his 2 adult daughters from his prior marriage to his lifelong sweetheart, who had tragically passed away from Alzheimer's. The shared experience of loss and caregiving formed an unexpected bond between Jack and Francois. My mom dealing with patients and taking care of people, she knew about that stuff, and they just clicked. Physically, they presented a striking contrast that only highlighted their harmonious connection. My mom was short, about 5 feet 1 inch, little petite French lady, and Jack was a tall, giant guy. Despite, or perhaps because of, these differences, their personalities complemented each other beautifully. They just got along perfect, and they made each other glow. You know what I mean? This glowing connection spoke volumes about their compatibility and deep affection. Although Francois maintained her own home, her time was predominantly spent in Jack's Surf City residence, signifying the central role it played in their shared life. This home became a cherished hub for family gatherings. We'd go there for summer, 4th of July a lot. I remember seeing fireworks there with them, and we'd all stay at the house. They would always cook like all of the seafood for us. These memories painted a picture of joyful togetherness and warm hospitality, underscoring the sense of community and love that emanated from their home. Their relationship, spanning approximately 15 years, was characterized by some very idyllic retirement life, a life of contentment and peace that made their violent end all the more tragic and incomprehensible. By the year 2021, Jack and Francois had begun to contemplate a significant life change, indicative of their advancing age and desire for a different pace. Jack wanted to sell the house because they were getting older, and I think he just wanted to get something smaller, maybe 1 level. This practical decision to downsize and simplify was further influenced by the geographical relocation of his brother and sister-in-law, who already, moved to Florida. This familial precedent, combined with their own desires for a less demanding lifestyle, coalesced into a clear future aspiration. So that was a plan. Their vision was one of a simpler, potentially warmer retirement. However, fate, through a brutal and unforeseen intervention, tragically ensured that the couple would never get to make their move south a reality. Jack and Francois had become the helpless victims of a brutal crime, their peaceful retirement plans irrevocably shattered by an act of incomprehensible violence. And so, the determined investigators of New Jersey found themselves confronting the harrowing task of unraveling the mystery and identifying who was responsible for these monstrous deeds. One of the initial and most noticeable aspects observed by investigators at the crime scene was the prominent presence of a for sale sign outside. This seemingly innocuous detail, indicative of their plans to relocate, immediately introduced a crucial contextual layer to the investigation. The timing of the crime, the end of September, further highlighted a distinct characteristic of Surf City. So again, it's a time where Surf City is largely uninhabited. This seasonal quietude raised an early, pertinent question. Is this something that where someone took an opportunity to go in and see what they could find? The initial hypothesis often considers crimes of opportunity, particularly in areas susceptible to such opportunistic acts during off-peak seasons. However, this line of reasoning was quickly challenged and largely dismissed by a critical piece of evidence. But there was cash found in the house. The presence of undisturbed currency directly contradicted the theory of a robbery-motivated home invasion. This vital detail steered the investigation away from the paths of casual theft or random violence, and strongly to a more focused, personal motive. The nature and sheer number of wounds suffered by the two victims further solidified the theory of a deeply personal attack, vehemently rejecting any notion of a dispassionate, financially driven crime. Most of the stab wounds were to the face, neck, and front of the body, indicating a direct, confrontational, and deeply hostile intent. Francois's injuries were particularly extensive. She had also stab wounds to her back, as well as a slashing wound across her throat. This catalog of wounds emphatically declared, so we're not talking once or twice. We're not talking a quick death. This was not merely about extinguishing life. It was about inflicting profound suffering and demonstrating immense fury. From a criminal psychological perspective, such excessive violence or overkill almost invariably signifies a crime of passion, a deeply emotional outburst where the perpetrator's rage transcends a functional need to kill. As one investigator unequivocally stated, summing up the psychological signature of the scene, "For me, it was rage. It was anger. This wasn't business. This wasn't a robbery. This was personal." This declaration served as the cornerstone of the investigation's focus, recognizing that the emotional landscape of the killer was far more significant than any material gain. The investigation was now fully entrenched, exploring the labyrinthine depths of the victims' lives and relationships, meticulously searching for the nexus of animosity that could have culminated in such an abhorrent act. The next phase involved delving into the complex interpersonal dynamics that would ultimately point to the perpetrator. In due course, it became chillingly clear that investigators had indeed unearthed evidence indicating the victims were embroiled in a virulent family feud. The intensity of these conflicts, fueled by financial disputes and personal resentments, was potent enough to shatter familial connections. A key insight gained from a family member shed light on the stark nature of the estrangement between Jack and some of his relatives. The relationship broke up. They just cut them off completely. This complete severing of ties, a hallmark of profound, unresolved conflict, left a gaping void in family relations, a potential breeding ground for malice. A crucial moment in the investigation, the surveillance video, also yielded a spectral clue, introducing an elusive suspect who moved with unsettling stealth in the pre-dawn hours. We were able to actually see what I would call almost like a ghostly figure go by. This fleeting visual, though obscured, confirmed a presence and set the stage for a forensic pursuit. The Surf City detectives, now tasked with unraveling the threads of this brutal double murder, were grappling with a deeply unsettling scene. Jack Enders and Francois Patois had been found stabbed to death in their own waterfront home, their peaceful retirement brutally shattered. The overwhelming nature of the violence inevitably led to the most pressing, fundamental question. The first thought is, who could have done something like this? The raw savagery suggested a deeply personal attack, leading investigators to closely scrutinize the immediate circle of the victims. As the initial walkthrough progressed, particular details about the crime scene began to surface, offering crucial insights into the perpetrator's mindset and relationship with the deceased. You start to notice different things about this scene. For example, the manner in which Jack Ender's body was found, covered with clothing over his face and body, stood in stark contrast to Francois Patois, who was not covered. This specific differentiation resonated deeply with investigative psychology. The locations of their primary injuries also differed significantly. He was stabbed in the chair. That's where those injuries were inflicted. Frenchie was stabbed in. Bed. These details painted a dynamic, evolving scene of violence. The act of covering Jack's body, especially when contrasted with the neglect of Francoise, offered a profound psychological window into the killer's possible state of mind. We find in these investigations that when it's, someone that is close to someone after they commit these crimes, sometimes they cover them with clothing that they can't, see what they've done. This act is often interpreted as an attempt by the perpetrator to psychologically distance themselves from the horrific reality of their actions, an unconscious manifestation of guilt, or a residual, albeit twisted, form of care or attachment for the victim. It's a way of not having to visually confront the full extent of the horror they themselves created. This distinctive action strongly suggested that whoever committed this act had a closer connection to Jack, implying a deeply personal relationship and thus a highly personal motive directed primarily at him. This was a critical early deduction, directing the investigative focus squarely onto Jack's immediate familial or intimate circle. In the pursuit of every possible lead, crime scene technicians diligently combed through the entire residence, meticulously searching for additional clues that might shed light on the perpetrator's identity. Once the initial law enforcement officers had secured the scene, our crime scene investigation unit was called to undertake the comprehensive forensic analysis. A crucial location identified during this meticulous examination was directly at the top of the stairs was a bathroom. Within this secondary bathroom, telltale signs of the perpetrator's actions were discovered. And in that bathroom, there was blood on the sink. There was some blood on the counter. There was a towel. The presence of these elements suggested a very deliberate post-crime action. So it looks like whoever did this washed up in the guest bathroom. This act of attempting to cleanse oneself, even minimally, of the physical evidence of the crime is a common behavior pattern observed in perpetrators seeking to obscure their presence and evade immediate detection. Samples of the genetic material, identified by investigators as blood, were painstakingly collected from all surfaces the killer might have touched, encompassing door handles, fixtures, and other contact points. Concurrently, any latent prints, particularly foot impressions, were carefully documented and lifted for analysis. On the kitchen floor, in proximity to the chaotic events that unfolded, investigators noted a crucial and telling detail. We do see what appears to be footprints and blood. The intersection of these two elements, direct evidence of genetic material and physical impression, represented a significant forensic opportunity. To effectively process these elusive traces, we use a chemical called imido black to process the scene. This specialized chemical reagent, designed to enhance latent blood prints, proved effective in revealing multiple latent impressions that were found. This discovery held immense potential, as foot impressions can, under ideal circumstances, be as uniquely identifying as fingerprints. The immediate priority in forensic analysis, when dealing with unknown prints at a crime scene, is to eliminate known individuals. Therefore, the first thing that we will want to do is take elimination prints from both our female and our male victim. This critical step allows for the comparison of known victim prints against unknown prints, a process essential for determining whether the unidentified prints belong to a perpetrator. Subsequent analysis confirmed. I was then able to compare both of their feet to the print that was lifted at the scene and exclude both our female victim as well as our male victim. This categorical exclusion solidified the understanding that the bloody foot impressions belonged to the unknown perpetrator, narrowing the investigative focus significantly. The crucial challenge, however, was immediately recognized. There is no database at this time that houses foot impressions. Unlike fingerprints, which are systematically collected and stored in national databases, foot impressions lack such a centralized repository. Consequently, for these valuable foot impressions to yield an identification, a specific suspect would first have to be developed. We would have to develop a suspect first So then we can then obtain that suspect's footprints. This explained the strategy for matching later in the investigation. By this point, approximately 4 agonizing hours had elapsed since Valerie's initial, desperate request for a welfare check on her mother, Francois. The passage of time without concrete news deepened Valerie's palpable dread, and she found herself beginning to succumb to the terrifying realization that the worst possible scenario might have unfolded. The persistent lack of contact, despite her repeated attempts, created an agonizing silence. "Nobody's calling me back," she recalled, articulating the isolating frustration of being hundreds of miles away, in Virginia, while tragedy unfolded. Desperate for answers and a more direct point of contact, Valerie turned to her daughter. "My daughter lives in Willowboro, New Jersey." Seizing upon her daughter's geographical proximity, Valerie instructed her. "I called my daughter. I said, Noonie, I'm going to send you the address to Jack. I want you to go over there and see what's going on." This act was a maternal instinct to bridge the distance, to send someone she trusted to the epicenter of her escalating fears. At the scene, amidst the developing horror, Surf City patrolmen were conducting their grim duties when one of them approached a detective. The patrolman informed the detective that there was a female that was looking to speak with A. Detective assigned a case. This individual was, of course, Valerie's daughter, Noonie, who had arrived as requested. Valerie, maintaining virtual contact from Virginia, provided another critical piece of information. "My daughter calls me on FaceTime. I told my daughter to hold up the phone so that I could see the house." As Noonie complied, displaying the scene, Valerie immediately identified a key component that spoke volumes about the victim's usual routines. "And she does. And I tell the police officer, that's Jack's truck. My mom doesn't drive no more. If they go anywhere, they're going to take Jack's truck. So where are they?" The presence of Jack's vehicle at the residence, coupled with a continued lack of communication, profoundly underscored the severity of the situation. If they were merely away, their primary mode of transportation would likely be gone with them. This subtle yet powerful observation indicated that the occupants, if deceased or incapacitated, were indeed still within the home. The scene, already complex, became more delicate regarding notification protocols. "It's tricky at times," acknowledged an investigator, regarding the imperative to follow precise legal and ethical guidelines. "We knew who the people were inside the house, but we needed to identify them in a medically appropriate manner before notifying them, the family members of the death. This procedural diligence is critical, ensuring positive identification and preparing family for traumatic news. Understanding the need for a formal and empathetic interaction, the detectives extended an invitation to Noonie. I asked Noonie if she'd minded if we go back to the headquarters and do a formal sit-down and interview her, which she agreed to. This formalized interview setting provided the necessary privacy and structure for Noonie to share what she knew. At the Surf City police station, Valerie's daughter, Noonie, commenced providing detectives with a comprehensive account of her knowledge regarding her grandmother, Jack, and their wider family dynamic. The investigator's initial objective in such interviews is not simply to gather facts, but to understand the intricate human tapestry surrounding the victims. We try to get a little information on the family dynamic, an investigator explained, keeping a crucial theory at the forefront of their minds. Keeping that in mind that whoever committed this act may have had a closer connection to Jack. This working hypothesis, derived from the selective covering of Jack's body, focused their inquiry on close relationships. Through Noonie, detectives learned a significant piece of information, and we learned that Jack has 2 daughters, both of which are in Pennsylvania. This immediately broadened the geographical scope of their potential suspect pool. Noonie's testimony revealed a deep-seated estrangement between Jack and both his daughters, Sherry and Terry, over a period of years. Both his daughters weren't talking to him, and he's just like, "I don't know what happened. He felt bad because he didn't know why." This account portrayed a father bewildered and saddened by the distance that had grown between him and his children. The breakdown of his relationship with Terry was explicitly attributed to her husband. The relationship between him and Terry broke up because of her and her husband. Relationship. They cut him off, just cut him off completely. Such complete severing of ties, often indicative of profound conflict, painted a picture of deep-seated familial animosity. However, the estrangement with Sherry, the other daughter, appeared to stem from a series of events, including what was described as an apparent betrayal of Francois. One specific incident resonated deeply. Any holidays, my mom would send cards, and she'd send Sherry a card with $200. This gesture of generosity was met with what was perceived as an act of fraudulence. So she calls me up, and she's crying and everything. I'm like, what's wrong with you? She said Sherry took the $200 check and changed it into a $2,000 check. This serious allegation of check alteration, while it never came of it because Jack wound up, paying my mom back for that check, left a corrosive impact. It effectively threw their relationship apart, creating an irreparable rift rooted in distrust and financial impropriety. Despite such emotionally charged accounts from family members, the investigative team maintained a rigorously objective stance. We try not to be too influenced when somebody says this person hated them or they hated each other. The reason for this disciplined approach is fundamental to forensic inquiry. People's opinions, people's positions, things of that nature are just not relevant. What's relevant is the evidence. At this critical juncture in the investigation, while Sherry was emerging as a person of interest due to the anecdotal evidence, the objective proof linking her to the crime scene was still developing. At this point, what we don't have is something concrete that says, this was Sherry Heffernan. The caution underscored the paramount importance of concrete forensic and material evidence, especially in a case of this magnitude. And when you're dealing with something as heinous as a double murder, you want to make sure that you get it right. This commitment to accuracy, to the precise convergence of evidence, epitomized the unwavering ethical standard of the investigators. Following the pivotal interview with Nooney, the granddaughter of Francois Patois, detectives had coalesced their initial lead onto a specific individual as a potential suspect in the brutal homicides. Jack Ender's 55-year-old daughter, Sherry Heffernan. The family dynamics described, coupled with the earlier psychological profiling, were beginning to construct a compelling narrative around Sherry. While Jack did indeed have two adult daughters, Terry had been explicitly estranged from the broader family unit for a significant number of years, making her involvement seem less direct. Sherry, on the other hand, despite growing tensions, still maintained tangible ties to Jack. But it was these very ties that had recently become fraught with contention. As of late, had been having a falling out with him. The friction between Sherry and her father was more immediate and actively unfolding. Sherry and her dad were having a difficult time. One family member succinctly summarized, highlighting the palpable strain. Yet, despite this growing suspicion, the investigative team held steadfast to a core principle. But we want to make sure the evidence dictates where we go with our investigation. The objective was not to chase unsubstantiated accusations, but to follow the undeniable trail of physical evidence. To build a comprehensive understanding, we talked to everybody in this case, any friends we can find, any family members, just to build a bio on these people, ensuring no stone was left unturned in understanding the lives and relationships intertwined with the tragedy. Sherry's personal background was diligently pieced together by investigators. She was identified as the youngest of two, her mother being the older daughter. Sherry had one son and was divorced, which are common biographical details. Her professional history included work as a real estate agent and a period where I believe she had done some financial work. Critically, her professional life intersected with her father's, forming a complex history of collaboration. Her and her dad had been business partners that appeared over the years with different ventures. This financial intertwining amplified the significance of any potential disputes related to assets. Jack's attempt to divest himself of the Surf City house had been long-standing. Jack had been trying to sell this house for quite some time now. He had even, at least once before, designated Sherry, leveraging her professional expertise as a realtor as the listing agent. He had listed it at least once before and used his daughter, Sherry, as a listing agent because she was a realtor. She was in charge of doing it. But it never got sold. This failed attempt at a sale created a clear point of frustration, both for Jack and potentially for Sherry, especially if she stood to benefit from the sale. A family member's comment, and I think my grandfather got frustrated by that, reflected the growing tension. The friction reached a critical point when Jack, exasperated by the lack of progress, made a unilateral decision to hire a different real estate agent to handle the sale. This action directly contradicted Sherry's perceived role and further eroded her position of influence regarding the property. This decision, as might be expected, deeply upset Sherry, primarily because she wanted to be the one to sell it. Her expectation, born from past involvement and professional identity, was undermined, adding another layer of resentment to the existing familial strife. From a psychological viewpoint, this confluence of perceived slights, the check fraud incident, the removal from the will, and now the disbarment from the property sale, painted a picture of a woman feeling increasingly marginalized, financially disenfranchised, and betrayed by her own father, setting the stage for a catastrophic outburst. As investigators intensified their scrutiny of Sherry Heffernan, a parallel and equally vital development unfolded on October 4th. The medical examiner officially confirmed the identities of the two victims, Jack Enders and Francois Patois. This crucial step allowed the police to formally and empathetically notify the families of the deceased, a moment of profound grief and confirmation. I answered the door, and the police officer said that they're gone. They're no longer here. And I just immediately started crying. This raw emotional account captures the devastating impact of such news on loved ones, marking the painful transition from agonizing uncertainty to heartbreaking certainty. While the grieving families began the arduous process of coming to terms with their unimaginable loss, the investigators pivoted their attention to the autopsies for more precise and scientific answers regarding the nature of the deaths. The forensic autopsies proved to be absolutely instrumental, unveiling details about the victim's final moments and the methods employed by the killer. The autopsy revealed that Francois was stabbed 39 times all over her back and her neck, confirming the extent and viciousness of the non-firearm assault. Jack, her partner, had endured even more extreme violence. Jack had been stabbed 51 times. In addition to the stab wounds, his injuries included grievous trauma to his facial structure. Both sides of his jaw were broken. These initial findings, while horrifying, were further compounded by an additional, critical discovery during Francois' autopsy. But it wasn't until the autopsy of Francois that they noted the clear bullet hole through her jaw. This single detail unequivocally indicated the use of a firearm, introducing a new dimension to the attack. The presence of a gunshot wound in Francois prompted a crucial re-examination of Jack's injuries, which then made them take Jack back out. During this re-evaluation, through careful reconstruction of his jaw, it became clearly seen it was a bullet, confirming that he, too, had been shot. This dual modality of attack, firearm and stabbing, pointed to an exceptionally brutal and perhaps premeditated series of actions. Further analysis by the forensic pathologist provided a clearer picture of the initial firearm assaults, determining that the gunshot wounds were from a close distance. This detail dispelled any notion of a distant attack, reinforcing the direct, personal nature of the confrontation. From the sequence and nature of the injuries, a chilling timeline of events within the house began to solidify. From that point, we believe that Jack was led down the stairs at gunpoint after being shot in the face and led to that chair where he was ultimately found. This scenario painted a horrifying picture of controlled terror, of Jack being systematically marched to his death. His subsequent, prolonged suffering in the chair was evidenced by most of his stab and slash wounds were in the front, as well as his arms as he was trying to defend himself at that point, sitting in the chair. These defensive wounds were irrefutable proof of a desperate struggle for survival, while Jack was subjected to this torment. An equally disturbing scenario unfolded concerning Francois. While whoever is committing this crime is inflicting these stab wounds now upon Jack, we believe that Francois actually survived and made her way down the stairs. This implies a horrific interval where one victim endured extreme violence while the other, gravely wounded, was still alive and attempting to escape or find help. The sheer overkill and deliberate nature of the wounds provided profound psychological insight into the killer's mindset. An investigator articulated this chillingly. Whoever did this could have shot him in the temple. That would have been fatal. The fact that they did not opt for such a swift, merciful end, choosing instead a prolonged, brutal assault with multiple weapons, conveyed a clear message. But this was somebody who was angry with these people and wanted them to know that they were angry with them. This powerful statement crystallized the motive. It was not merely about killing, but about conveying the perpetrator's profound, personal rage, to make the victims understand the depth of their fury in their final, excruciating moments. The autopsy findings also played a pivotal role in establishing a critical timeline for the murder, shifting the investigation's focus from the discovery date to the actual time of death. The bodies were found in what I would call in the early stages of decomposition, a forensic indicator that implied the deaths did not occur on the day of discovery. This observation immediately instructed investigators that we couldn't just look at October 3rd, even October 2nd. We had to go back as far as we could. This expanded the investigative window, allowing for a broader search for pre-existing evidence and movements. A crucial breakthrough that materialized. Officers made me aware of video that existed that was recorded from a neighboring residence's surveillance system. This technological asset, commonplace in modern investigations, often provides invaluable, unbiased perspectives. When our detectives reviewed it, we found that on September 29th, a surveillance camera was able to pick up a white Winnebago. The identification of the specific vehicle type and color, linked to a precise time and location, marked a significant investigative leap. The camera recorded the vehicle as it drove down North 7th Street in the direction of the victim's home shortly before 5 a.m. This placed the Winnebago, and by extension its occupant, in the immediate vicinity of the crime scene at a critically early hour. The vehicle then performed an action suggesting concealment. We see this vehicle pull up, park. Approximately an hour later, its lights exhibited an unusual pattern. Approximately an hour later, we see the vehicle moving. The lights are turned off at one point, suggesting a deliberate attempt to remain unseen or to move stealthily. Further careful review of the surveillance footage revealed the vehicle leaving the area approximately 50 minutes later at approximately 5:50 a.m. However, the narrative took another turn as an individual is seen a short time later walking back towards the victim residence. This disembarkation and return on foot rather than directly by vehicle added a layer of covert behavior to the suspect's actions. The visual quality of this footage was limited due to the early hour and lighting conditions. We were able to actually see what I would call almost like a ghostly figure go by. I mean, this is 5 a.m. in the morning. It's dark. Despite the poor visibility, the confirmed presence of a moving individual detached from the vehicle and returning to the immediate vicinity of the house was profoundly significant. After a brief but intense search, detectives located an additional security camera in the area, providing a more advantageous perspective. This second camera yielded clearer footage of their suspect leaving the victim's house. a critical 2 hours later than the initial departure, providing further valuable information regarding the total time spent at the scene. That surveillance showed an individual who goes over the bay, climbs over the white little picket fence there, goes over into the neighbor's yard, and begins walking away. The circuitous route, avoiding direct pathways, suggested an intentional effort to evade potential observation, hinting at a heightened degree of awareness and planning on the part of the perpetrator. The individual was partially obscured, described as having a hood up, appeared to be wearing clothing and shoes that were just too big for them, a detail that would later prove immensely significant. Critically, forensic analysis subsequently confirmed, carrying, something yellow in their hand. And we do find blood, Francois's blood, on that fence. This direct biological evidence, linked to the victim and found on the suspect's escape path, dramatically narrowed the investigative scope, based on the interaction with the environment. Specifically, looking at the height of the fence, investigators estimated the suspect's stature. They appear to be about 5 feet 8 inches, 5 feet 9 inches, 5 feet 7 inches, somewhere in there. This general height approximation was an essential physical characteristic for profiling. The collective weight of the surveillance and forensic evidence led to a firm conviction. We believe that this person was most likely our murder suspect. The determination to bring the perpetrator to justice was unwavering. I wasn't going to quit until we found out who it was, and they were in jail for the rest of their lives. Hours into the relentlessly unfolding investigation of Jack Ender's and Francois Patois' violent and tragic deaths, detectives had successfully gleaned their first tangible, albeit partially obscured, glimpse of the killer. The surveillance footage provided concrete evidence of the individual's presence, movement, and critical interaction with the crime scene perimeter. However, a significant observation regarding the suspect's appearance, whoever took extra precautions not to be recognized, highlighted a degree of cunning and foresight. The detail that it appeared that this person who committed the murders took Jack's clothes and wore them out of the house, provided a logical explanation for the seemingly oversized attire observed on the video, suggesting a deliberate attempt to change blood-stained garments and obscure their true physical presentation. At this stage, a definitive gender identification remained elusive. We do not know at this point whether it's a male or female. What was known was a crucial physical characteristic. All that we're able to tell is whoever did this is approximately 5 feet 8 inches. The critical link to the white Winnebago was now firmly established. We also know that the person that committed this act arrived in the Winnebago. The meticulous timeline, gleaned from various sources, placed the arrival between the hours of, say, 3:45 in the morning till after 7 o'clock in the morning on the 29th. Tracking a vehicle on a small, contained geographical entity like a barrier island presented unique opportunities, despite the challenges. Can't pull every surveillance camera on the island was a practical reality. However, the island's unique access points offered a strategic advantage. But it's a barrier island. You're going over a bridge to get there. There's one way in and one way out. The single point of entry and exit meant that bridge has cameras. This provided a choke point for observation, a critical avenue for vehicle tracking. Focus on this crucial gateway. So we started looking at this camera, the eastbound camera, coming onto Long Beach Island. And sure enough, the elusive vehicle appeared. Sure enough, we see the Winnebago come over the bridge. Then came the perplexing enigma that initially baffled the investigative team. But then we don't see it get to the other side. So we're all looking at this video. What the heck happened to the car? It's a Winnebago. It doesn't vanish. Where did it go? This apparent disappearance of such a large vehicle sparked intense analytical effort. The puzzle was ultimately resolved through diligent review. That vehicle, as we continue to watch the surveillance, leaves that area around 7 a.m., headed westbound. This men had been present on the island, completed its journey, and departed, with the mystery of an internal movement on the island still requiring a deeper dive. While the grainy bridge camera footage did not allow investigators to definitively make out a license plate, their burgeoning suspicions about the killer's identity meant that they might not need this precise identifier to locate the vehicle. The connection forged through family interviews, specifically pertaining to Sherry Heffernan, proved invaluable. I searched for Sherry and was able to find an old license for Sherry with Sherry Enders as the name, an ancestral name suggesting a previous marital status or maiden name. Using the details from this driver's license, the investigator was able to perform a targeted search, eventually locating a New Jersey registration. This crucial document, in a triumphant moment of deduction, came back to a 2003 Winnebago, directly linking Sherry Heffernan to the specific vehicle observed entering and exiting the island at the time of the murders, while this singular connection did not, at this stage, constitute definitive proof that Sherry was the one who committed the heinous murders. Her undeniable link to the critical vehicle made it absolutely imperative that detectives find her and bring her in for questioning. This connection placed her squarely at the center of their unfolding investigation. The swift identification of Sherry Heffernan's connection to the Winnebago accelerated the investigation into high gear. Authorities quickly pinpointed her primary residence outside of Philadelphia, which allowed them to coordinate efforts with the Pennsylvania State Police. Upon instruction, the Pennsylvania State Police were dispatched to conduct a discreet surveillance operation, specifically to confirm the presence of the critical vehicle. Their report confirmed the investigators' findings. Pennsylvania State Police drive by the residence and let us know that the Winnebago is parked in the driveway of that residence. An irrefutable verification that cemented the connection between Sherry and the primary vehicle of interest. With the Winnebago confirmed, New Jersey detectives promptly traveled to Pennsylvania to link up with their counterparts. We meet up with the Pennsylvania State Police, who says, "There hasn't been anyone coming or going from the house, but there's a truck parked in the house." This observation was immediately noted. A short while after the arrival of the New Jersey team, the observed truck leaves the residence. This presented a dynamic, unexpected opportunity. The New Jersey detectives promptly asked Pennsylvania State Police to follow the vehicle, and Pennsylvania conducts that motor vehicle stop. This traffic stop proved significant, as they were able to ascertain the identity of the driver. They're able to identify the driver as J.J. Heffernan, who is the son of Sherry Heffernan. This discovery provided direct access to a close family member of the primary person of interest. From that point, J.J. was formally asked to come down and asked to provide a taped statement to speak about the family dynamic. Such interviews are critical for gathering insider information regarding potential motives, relationships, and the overall psychological climate surrounding the suspect. While detectives were engaged in their interview with J.J., the officers who had maintained their surveillance at Sherry's home made a strategic decision to escalate their approach. The officers that were conducting surveillance on Sherry's home have now decided to move forward. Their decision was buttressed by new information. They located an active warrant for Sherry Heffernan out of Norristown, Pennsylvania, though unrelated to the double murder investigation itself. This warrant provided the legal basis for immediate apprehension. Therefore, acting on this separate legal authority, so they approached the house and they called her out on a PA system under the strength of an unrelated warrant. This tactical approach ensured a safe and legal arrest. She did come out when she was ordered to, and she was arrested, bringing Sherry Heffernan directly into law enforcement custody for questioning regarding the horrific double murder. The news of Sherry Heffernan's arrest reverberated profoundly, sending shockwaves through the families of both Jack Enders and Francois Patois. For many, it was an unimaginable turn of events, challenging their perceptions of familial bonds and trust. I was surprised at first when they were going to investigate her. One family member confessed, articulating the initial disbelief and emotional resistance to the notion that someone so close could commit such an act. The very idea that Jack's own daughter could be implicated was deeply unsettling, triggering a crisis of comprehension. I thought they were close. What would her reasons be? These questions encapsulated the profound human struggle to reconcile intimate family ties with extreme violence, prompting a desperate search for logical, albeit tragic, explanations for her daughter's unthinkable actions against her own parent and his partner. Upon her arrest and the subsequent efforts to interview J.J., Sherry's son, detectives meticulously worked to verify and contextualize his testimony. Through a combination of J.J.'s account and rigorous corroboration, they were able to decisively eliminate him as a suspect in the brutal double murder. This crucial exoneration was largely achieved through the objective, undeniable evidence provided by his own phone records. We ultimately were able to rule her son out as a suspect through his phone records, which placed him in Maryland at the time these crimes were committed. This digital footprint offered irrefutable proof of his physical absence from the crime scene, effectively clearing his name. Furthermore, physical characteristics provided additional exclusionary evidence. Sherry's son was also about 6 feet 2 inches, 6 feet 3 inches. This height measurement stood in stark contrast to the estimate of the individual captured on surveillance footage. The person in this picture is about 5 feet 8 inches and a slender build. The clear discrepancy in physical stature further solidified his alibi, in a poignant testament to the complexity of familial loyalties and perhaps a lingering doubt. Nobody in the families matched that description except for Sherry. This crucial observation left investigators with a single, compelling individual whose physical profile aligned with the elusive figure on camera. J.J., despite his eventual exoneration, could not entirely discount the devastating possibility that his own mother was the perpetrator. And J.J. can't rule out the possibility that it was his mother. His interview, though limited in its direct incriminating statements, yielded important contextual information. He provides us with limited information, but important information, specifically that Sherry Heffernan owns and operates at Winnebago. This statement directly corroborated the crucial surveillance footage, strengthening the link between Sherry and the identified vehicle. Furthermore, J.J. shed light on elements of the turbulent family dynamic, revealing shared grievances. Also, he explained some of the family dynamic, that he and Sherry believe that Francois is a gold digger and that they blame her for their grandfather wanted to sell the house. This shared resentment toward Francois, perceived as an instigator of the will change in the property sale, provided another layer of motive, revealing a familial alignment and a hostile perception that likely further fueled Sherry's individual rage. Armed with deeper insight garnered from J.J.'s interview, investigators meticulously shifted their primary attention to Sherry Heffernan, who is now in custody. Upon her placement in an interview room, the standardized legal protocol was meticulously followed. She has read her rights, at which point she invokes her right to have an attorney present. This exercise of her constitutional rights meant that she does not give a statement, a common and legally sound decision for a suspect. While direct verbal testimony was withheld, the legal process allowed for another crucial piece of forensic evidence to be secured. However, the officers are able to collect a deoxyribonucleic acid swab from her. This collection of genetic material would prove invaluable for later comparative analysis with samples found at the crime scene. With Sherry in custody and the Winnebago securely identified, the investigative focus pivoted to securing comprehensive search warrants. We got a search warrant for that Winnebago and for her residence, just to see again if we can find some evidence connecting her or someone else to this crime. The execution of these warrants was critical to uncovering further material evidence. Upon inspecting the Winnebago, the vehicle that had been central to the surveillance footage, investigators immediately discovered damning visual evidence. When that warrant is executed, this Winnebago that has been the vehicle of interest in this case. We were able to see some red staining almost immediately in the driver's compartment of that vehicle. The presence of such staining, strongly suspected to be blood, inside the driver's area of the very vehicle linked to the crime, represented a powerful piece of circumstantial evidence. As the Winnebago was meticulously transported back to New Jersey for further analysis in a controlled forensic environment, investigators concurrently intensified their efforts at Sherry's Pennsylvania residence. The search of Sherry's home yielded a chilling arsenal of evidence directly linked to the murders. When we searched Sherry's house, we found ammunition that was the same as the shell casings found at the scene, a direct ballistic link that established the specific type of ammunition used, further cementing the connection to the lethal weapon. And we found a receipt for a gun. It was a receipt for a 9mm. This discovery was particularly potent because it explicitly documented Sherry's purchase of a firearm matching the caliber used in the fatal shooting of both Jack and Francois, a glaring absence then transformed into a compelling piece of evidence itself. Every other gun she had lawfully purchased we found in that house. We didn't find that one. The systematic collection of her lawfully owned firearms, juxtaposed with the distinct absence of the 9mm weapon she had purchased, strongly suggested that the specific gun was either at the crime scene disposed of or concealed, making it the most likely murder weapon. During the extensive execution of the search warrant at Sherry's residence, another layer of potential evidence was uncovered. We also noticed a surveillance system that is on the outside of the residence. The existence of personal security footage could provide critical insight into Sherry's movements before and after the murders. While investigators meticulously processed the external surveillance footage, they concurrently moved to secure a warrant for Sherry's cell phone, a modern-day treasure trove of digital information. The cell phone was very important. The data extracted from her device allowed for an unprecedented level of granular tracking and reconstruction of her movements. We were able to map it. The resulting digital journey provided a precise timeline. We're able to see that she leaves her residence at sometime after midnight, near the 1 o'clock hour on September 29th. Her precise route was painstakingly reconstructed, charting her movement, driving all the way up to the Pennsylvania Turnpike Bridge. She crosses the Delaware there, then comes all the way down to basically Route 72 eventually, which is the main artery going through Manahawkin into Long Beach Island, and crosses the bridge. This detailed digital trajectory gained immense significance due to the previous Winnebago surveillance. And this became important because we had her Winnebago on video surveillance going over this bridge. The cell phone data unequivocally confirmed that Sherry Heffernan herself was in the Winnebago, observed crossing the critical bridge at the opportune time. A subtle yet telling detail emerged regarding her navigational choices on the island. We were able to show that she actually turned when she got over the bridge early. Local law enforcement confirmed the implications of this unusual turn. We talked to the local police, and they said, yeah, that's a shortcut known by locals that avoids a couple of lights. This particular act, avoiding main thoroughfares, suggested a deliberate attempt to be discreet and perhaps avoid more visible routes. Her arrival at Jack and Francois' residence was pinpointed with chilling accuracy. She arrives at Jack and Francois' residence at approximately 4:58 a.m., a pivotal moment then registered on the digital timeline, and her cell phone is turned off a short while later. This deliberate cessation of her phone's signal marked the period of the murders, a calculated attempt to erase her digital presence. We have nothing else on that phone until it starts being used again at around 9 a.m. in Pennsylvania. The phone's reactivation coincided with her return to her home state, so it appears she got to the scene and turned her phone off, a chilling indicator of premeditation and an attempt to mask her movements during the critical hours of the crime. The subsequent tracking continued. We're able to then track her back into Landenberg ultimately until she arrives at her home right in the evening hours of September 29th. The combined cell phone and bridge surveillance provided an unassailable timeline of her journey to and from the murder scene, placing her there definitively during the critical window. When investigators finally accessed the residential surveillance footage from Sherry's home, it yielded yet another layer of critical corroboration. While looking through that footage, I saw Sherry Heffernan returning home that day on the 29th. The time of her return was precisely noted. I believe it was 7:53 p.m. if I remember correctly. Further analysis of this footage unveiled a key post-crime action. She later goes back to Winnebago and removes some items that look very similar to what she was seen carrying when she left the residence in Surf City. This strongly suggested the methodical removal and likely disposal of items directly linked to the crime or her presence at the scene, implying an active effort to clean up or hide evidence. But perhaps the most damning visual detail emerged from the surveillance footage. And one of the things we were able to see is she was barefoot. This observation had immediate and profound implications for the case. It connected directly to one of the earliest and most critical pieces of forensic evidence found at the crime scene. And it was important because there were bloody footprints going out the front door at the crime scene. The convergence of this visual evidence with the forensic samples provided the final, indisputable link. Once Ms. Heffernan was arrested, I was then able to go and obtain her foot impressions. This critical step allowed for a direct, scientific comparison, and the results were conclusive, and I was able to then confirm that, in fact, the bloody foot impressions were Ms. Heffernan's, the scientific match, pairing the distinct impression of her bare feet with the bloody prints left at the murder scene, left no room for doubt. At that point, I had no doubt in my mind that we had the right person. The mountain of evidence, patiently and painstakingly assembled, now stood complete. The focus shifted from identification to conviction. Now we have to prove this defendant's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. The overwhelming question that had permeated the entire investigation, the agonizing, why would a daughter kill her father and his girlfriend in such a brutal way? Why would this person do this? Began to find its chilling answer to the tapestry of motive, opportunity, and cold, hard evidence. The pieces of this macabre puzzle, once scattered fragments of despair, were meticulously brought together, culminating in a powerful, undeniable narrative. The confluence of forensic analysis, surveillance technology, and diligent police work illuminated the darkness. The genetic material analysis, identified by the investigating unit, from the red staining found on 2 of the doorknobs at the crime scene, unequivocally returned results that established a direct link to both Sherry Heffernan and Jack Enders. This meant that Sherry's biological traces were present at the very points of contact in the house, affirming her direct, physical interaction within the crime scene, coupled with the discovery of her footprints, made in blood, leading out of the victim's home. This deoxyribonucleic acid evidence proved Sherry's physical presence at the scene of the double homicide, creating an undeniable foundation for the prosecution's case. The narrative of Jack's change will, removing Sherry as a primary beneficiary and bestowing his estate upon his grandson Andrew, provided the powerful and compelling motive that, when viewed through the lens of criminal psychology, explained immense rage observed in the crime scene. For Sherry, who had a history of financial ventures with her father and perceived entitlement to his assets, this act of disinheritance was likely interpreted as the ultimate betrayal and an irreparable affront to her self-worth and financial security. This emotional and material deprivation, combined with her father's decision to prevent her from selling his house, effectively snatching away her professional agency and potential financial gain, created a potent cocktail of resentment, fury, and perceived injustice. The witness's account of Jack explicitly telling Sherry he was taking her out of his will was the igniting spark, setting off an emotional detonation. This act, stripping away her expected inheritance and her role in the property sale, served as a perceived taken-away moment that, as one witness stated, just made her snap. Her calculated movements, beginning shortly after midnight on September 29th, 2021, from her Pennsylvania home, culminating in her 4:58 a.m. arrival at the Surf City residence, were not spontaneous acts but meticulously planned, covert operations. The act of turning off her cell phone shortly after her arrival, only to reactivate hours later, clearly demonstrated premeditation and an attempt to evade digital detection, signaling a mind actively working to cover its tracks. The sheer brutality of the murders. Francois stabbed 17 times in bed and later an additional 22 times on the stairs, sustaining a total of 39 stab wounds alongside a gunshot to the mouth. And Jack stabbed 51 times while seated in a chair, with grievous injuries to his jaw and defensive wounds, spoke volumes of the intense, personal rage that fueled the assailant. The differential treatment of the victims post-mortem, with Jack's body being covered while Francois was left exposed, further underscored the personal nature of the vendetta, largely directed at the father. The trial itself was a testament to the dedication of the prosecution and the resilience of the victims' families. Sherry's defense team, attempting to cast out, presented arguments that included the assertion that she's a 50-something-year-old woman. She's not physically capable of doing this. This tactic, aiming to leverage societal stereotypes about age and physical strength, was expertly countered by the prosecution. The unexpected revelation of the video depicting Sherry pushing this little boat on a trailer served as a concise and powerful visual rebuttal, shattering the illusion of her physical frailty and showcasing her capacity for strenuous physical activity. This evidence demonstrated that the jury could not simply dismiss her based on appearance or general assumptions. Ultimately, the combination of irrefutable scientific evidence, her deoxyribonucleic acid at the scene, her bloody foot impressions, her movements mapped by cell phone data and confirmed by surveillance footage, the discovery of ammunition matching the shell casings, and the missing 9mm